compared to other companies, the fastest growing businesses are 13% more likely to have a formal interview process that is consistently used with every candidate. So 13% improvement when they have a formal process for every candidate. Why do you think, why is it that the fast growers are better at having a formal process? And when I say better, the data says it's better, but why?
I think the key word there is process, right? So we need to follow a process instead of doing this haphazardly, because I keep going back to the economy right now. It's hard to find people. But even when it's not hard to find people, we need to take all of the pieces that we're talking about, using the job board, possibly a referral system, definitely having the interview questions listed, right? Who is interviewing the candidate, right? So what am I looking for, right? When I'm interviewing a salesperson, do I want them to do a preview of how they would sell my product? Do I want them to go on a ride along to see a client, right? So that they can get a good job preview, so they can select in or out. My formal interview process is going to look different for different organizations, and it's going to look different for different positions within the same organization. But you need to have a process. You need to be consistent for the compliance side, but you also need that consistency so that I can compare Mike to Scott appropriately, because I went through the same process. That's why we have processes, right? And I'd add to that formal interview process that what is my communication to the candidate? You can lose candidates very easily. If you remember way back when you were interviewing, Mike, what would happen sometimes is people would interview you, and then you feel like a jilted lover. You're like, they're not answering my emails. I haven't heard from them. Do I have the job? Do I not have the job? Yeah. Well, half of your candidates right now are going to go, well, I'm going to take one of these other 3 offers I was asked, or I don't want to work for that organization because there is no process there, which means there's no communication, right? So part of your formal interview process is, how are we communicating? Who's, the central person that's saying, hey, Mike, thanks for the interview with Scott. We'll get back to you in about a week. We'll get back to you this way. This is what's going on. You need to keep that communication going, or you are losing that candidate.
Yeah. I mean, this is not 2009 when there are, a bunch more candidates than there are job openings. Unemployment right now is under 3.4%. In some places, depending where you are, it's lower than that. This is a candidate's world, right? So how you treat them in the process is really important. And I think you were spot on when you said the key word here is process. You can't measure the effectiveness of your hiring, whatever you call it, if it's not a process, right? I'm a marketer. I think about, okay, how many impressions on a website, how many of those convert into leads, some of those leads convert into sales, what's the average dollar of those sales, how long do I retain a customer? It's a mathematical formula, and I'm always trying to optimize. Same thing here. It's like of the number of, how many candidates do I get to look at me? How many of those are qualified? What sources are those coming from? Right? And you should be quantifying and measuring this. But if you don't have a process, including the interview process, you can't optimize to make it better. Which means
right. And this is your first impression, right? If you don't have a formal interview process, right? Are you giving them the link to your website so that they can read more about the organization? Are you giving them, for in-person interviews, I've talked about in the past, give them some swag. Even if they don't get the job, I want them walking around with a short sweatshirt or t-shirt on, right? So, how are you attracting the candidates? And that formal interview process, again, goes back to professionalism and making a good first impression.